Hey yo, is that a hit tweet relative to the amount of followers I have? Time to capitalize on it by making a guide on how to do those warp cancels. Hi, I'm low tier goddess, or shape, or Reina, whatever you prefer. I'll be making a guide on advanced warp cancel techniques, covering the types of warps I'm using, how to do them, and potential routes through stages using them. I'll be referencing some other videos that have really good information. Definitely worth checking those out as well, just to get a fuller picture of it, but yeah. Let's get to it. Alright, so off the bat I have a confession. I am a cheater. I use a keyboard. This is essentially the same thing as a box. Same functionality. I'm using an adapter here from Keyboard GG by Nestan. So some of the inputs I do are going to be a little bit different, as you can see, visual inputs. But I have this piece of caveman technology to give you a better idea of what the inputs look like on an analog controller, so no worries there. Alright, just want to get that out of the way. The way I'm going to be structuring this guide is two parts. The first part being the what, how, and why of this. So what I'm doing in these videos, how to do it, and why it'd be worth learning. And then after that, kind of just routing through the stages with warps and some general mix-ups and mix-ups you can add to those routes. So yeah, what am I doing here? How am I getting these warp cancels? Some of these are probably common looking, other ones look wild. So three things I'm doing are standard warps, nothing fancy, just up B, hold a direction, then short warps, like that. And then another warp that I'm calling shallow warp. So it's essentially warping straight to the side, but slightly down. So you notice that warp was straight to the side. This one, slightly down, along with warping straight down too. So like, what's common is like you warp cancel like that. You can also warp cancel just by holding down relative to the edge of the platform. And that applies to both full warps and short warps. Like that's another one we'll be using, is just warping straight down. So that's what I'm doing. Now let's see how I'm doing it. So how do we do these? We're going to start with the hardest one, which is going to be short warps. There's two ways to shorten your warps. There's literally holding the stick a little less. That's a lot harder, but if you want to try that, you can definitely do that. And then yeah, there's the C-stick method, which is what most people are probably using if you're using a controller. For box, it's a lot easier because you can set a specific modifier angle. So essentially I can hold a modifier that shortens the analog stick length, but yeah, on Smashbox and keyboard, that's just an option. So the C-stick method essentially comes down to timing. So we're gonna go into frame advance real quick. There's a 3-frame window that you can shorten your warp with. Let's take a look at the warp animation real quick. So you start your warp, and then there's a star that comes out of Palutena. The last frame that star is visible is the first frame you can start holding the C-stick. But what's really obvious is this purple beam kind of look. This is the second frame, and the frame after is the third frame. So we're on that frame. I'm gonna hold the C-stick just to the right, so we'll get a short warp to the right. And then we'll run through it. She disappears. And this is also another thing you wanna watch out for is once she disappears, you're locked into your angle. So I'm gonna let go of the C-stick, and she's just gonna short warp to Kirby. Hi. The reason I bring that up is, yeah, with the C-stick method, I'm on that frame, I hold it. If I continue holding the C-stick, you buffer an aerial. So, yeah, the easiest way to avoid that is just going to be, you start that up B, time it, and then as soon as she's gone, you can just let go. On the other hand, you want to make sure that you hold the C-stick through those 3 frames. Let's say I hold the C-stick for 1 frame in here, and then I let go. You don't get the shorten. Another thing is the shorten. If you miss the shorten, it'll default to whatever your left analog stick is doing. So for example, let's say I'm hitting a shorten. I hold the C-stick there. But let's say, I don't know, I'm doing something goofy with the analog stick and I'm holding to the left, and I let go of the C-stick too early. I'm gonna go that way and die. Just some nuances there that you want to watch out for, so you're not SDing, you're not getting weird misinputs. The time itself isn't too hard. So like right now I'm doing the C-stick method. What I like to think about is right before she disappears is when I want to like flick the C-stick. And again, I don't really use the C-stick method, so I don't have the timing down, but it's not too bad. I'm gonna switch over to my Pro controller and Just give you some inputs from there as well. Same idea, up being, and you're timing it. And again, I don't use this method because boxes are literally cheating. But yeah, the timing's not too bad. Like you can see I'm hitting it with like basically no practice. Also when that like sound happens during the warp, I can also up your timing, like that first zwing, that's when you want to like hit the C stick. And again, it's gonna be different for everyone. Just takes practice grinding it out. Palutena has execution now, guys. And then the last thing I wanna quickly take a look at is just a control recommendation, where I have special on the trigger, and that's gonna be helpful for two different things. It's gonna help with short warps and those shallow warps, so you can like buffer stuff. With that, you can kind of just hold up, press up B, and then all you have to focus on is just the timing. There we go. Well, you get the idea. Again, I'm not great with using controllers anymore. I've been using keyboard for like 3 years now. Before I move on, just some quick recommendations for videos on short warping that are probably better than my explanation in case something doesn't quite make sense. Kaiser on YouTube has made a really good video on it. Also another good video done by Hydra Soryu. So switching back to keyboard real quick so I can cover shallow warping. We got a short warping, and there's also shallow warping. So this is just the term I'm using for it because it's a unique thing that kind of opens up some more options for warping and warp routes. So shallow warping is going to be warping not straight to the side, but kind of down. So not quite to the left or right, but just a little bit down. The biggest use for that is going to be like connecting these side platforms. So instead of like, you know, landing directly on it or not landing on it, you can run off, double jump, and you'll be canceling off the edge. This is the warp type I'm like the least familiar with right now, just because I have not spent time really grinding it out. So that, you know, instead of having to go all the way through the top platform or not even having a top platform to add to your warp routes, you can literally just cut through across these side platforms, which is really, really cool in my opinion. Opens up a lot more options for circle camping. Works on this stage and PS2 as well. It also opens up routes for those monoplat stages, so like Smashville and Hollow Bastion. That's shallow warping. Let's hop into the stick viewer real quick just so I can give you those exact angles real quick. So it's not quite forward, not quite 45, it's about here, right about there. Same thing there, it's about there. This is a good time to switch over to analog stick so we can get an even closer look at it, and then I'll do that as well in game. Here we are. So yeah, about there-ish. A lot shallower than 45. I mean, the nice thing about analog stick is that you can use this entire range, going by feel and positioning, change your angle if needed, but it's just very close to like left and right, essentially. The hard part here is just getting that angle, which is also why having special on the trigger is going to be useful, because then you can also do C-stick up and special at the same time. So if you time this right, you get an up B. People that use controllers are going to have a better time hitting this. But that's going to allow you to just do an up B and not worry about going to that one angle. So again, just a recommendation to potentially not have to worry about precise inputs on the analog stick and being able to kind of like, you know, separate them between both sticks, making things a little easier. I'm gonna use the frame advance to hit one of these. A good landmark to look out for when you're practicing this is as you go for the up B, so like you'll start your double jump around here or so, you'll you'll start your up B, and then you're kind of angling it. What's gonna happen is when Palutena warps, she's gonna end up literally inside like the middle of the platform. And again, I'm holding forward and just slightly down, and then we should hit and cancel off it. See, double jump out. Those are the two like specific warps I'm using to get a lot of these unique cancels off the platforms and ledges. One last like quote unquote type of warp that I'm using, and that's warping just straight down. So, you know, usually you get a warp like that, where you know you jump out, up B, and then you're going like 45 degrees down at the platform. You can also just literally just warp straight down like that. That also works. And that's necessary for a few of the routes. And this also applies to short warping too. So this is where the holding up and B is going to help. Like that. So full warps and short warps straight down is going to be a necessary part to some of those. This is a good example actually here. So like if I warp 45, I'm dead. But from that same position, if we warp down, then I get my cancel. Whenever you warp straight down, you will go in the direction Palutena is facing. So that's something to keep in mind. The cool thing about all these like cancels is whenever she cancels out of a warp, she's going to be facing the direction that she warp canceled from. Let's do one here. I'm facing away, warp cancel. She's facing that way. Very, very minor thing. Not sure how much it's going to affect stuff, but depending on the type of warp you're using when you're edge canceling, will give you a different amount of momentum out of it. And of course, drift will affect this as well. But potentially worth bringing up. I think it's important when you're hitting consecutive warp cancels because you get different amounts of momentum. It's especially important when you're hitting down cancels off the ledge, especially on Small Battlefield and Battlefield, just because those are frame perfect. You can buffer them, no biggie. But if you don't, you SD off the side. So that brings us to the why of this section, which is going to be circle camping and disadvantage. Those are the two big ones. Obviously, with disadvantage, that opens up a lot more angles and positions you can cancel off of. So, if you're in a bad spot, if you're getting juggled, there's a lot more you can do just to kind of get out of those situations. And then, yeah, circle camping, because, a character, for example, Kirby, is not going to be able to do anything about all this movement. Like, you could be on one side of the stage and decide to go to the other side just like that. Just snap. We're over here now. Like, there's some double jumps or, timings, I guess, you can watch out for if you're on the receiving end of this kind of movement. But, again, if you're a slow character, you're really, really out of luck. I'm going to be going through the stages based on difficulty/utility, so we're going to start with Kalos' route. Kalos probably has the least utility outside of FD. FD, you can't really do anything outside of just basic ledge canceling, which, it's always been there. I don't know, you could maybe get creative with it with like shallow warping at the ledge, but even then, there's not much to do. You can't really circle camp super well with it, really. So yeah, Kalos. I'm just looking at the footage that I recorded when I was tassing it. So, ledge cancel, and then it's just a bunch of short warps on the side platforms. That's really all you can get out of it, sadly. And you can also, mix it up by warping down to the ledge from the platform as well. That's also an option. I shortened it, but I think you can get away with a full-length warp from that spot. That's all I had to say about Kalos, so not much to do there, unfortunately, but that's kind of the route for that one. So this is where it gets a little more interesting. So Smashville, let it rip real quick. So this one doesn't involve any short warps. Start with that first warp, which I think this is just a ledge cancel warp. Nope. So that's a short warp to hit there. And then from here, we're actually warping straight down and then ledge canceling. Double jump up. And then you're doing a shallow warp to this edge. And then from there, you can, warp straight down again to that ledge. And then the other option we just saw there is you can double jump and then warp to that corner. So it's pretty simple, but again, the amount of mix-ups that you have at each of those positions, makes up for it. It's pretty easy. It's just the shallow warps you got to really worry about. Now let's switch over to Hollow Bastion real quick, which is very, 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 very similar. It's almost identical. I want to say there's like one or two differences. It's a bit bigger. The biggest difference, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be, instead of warp canceling straight down from here, you're not going to make it. It's just a 45-degree warp. That's the only difference. It's still very chill. Another thing to watch out for both Small Battlefield and Hollow Bastion is going to be this right here for the shallow warp. You want to make sure you're at pretty much the very peak of your jump for your shallow warp, or else you're going to kind of cut down through it. On analog controllers, you can probably adjust your angle a little bit to get away with whatever you need to. Just a heads up there, you just want to make sure you have enough height above the platform. The double jump will get you high enough, as you can see. It takes you to where you need to be. But yeah, pretty low execution, but pretty useful overall. Town and City is probably the most unique compared to Battlefield of the warp cancel routes. One thing I want to mention, so that was a short warp onto that, cancel into a shallow warp here, and then this was super frustrating, but I just could not figure it out. You can double jump, short warp, and then cancel it there, but even while tassing it, frame by frame, it was really finicky. I think it has to do with making sure you drift in, because these platforms are wider, so it's a lot harder to get to hit. I guess you also have to be a little lower as you hit it. So I ended up just opting for double jump and then full warps. They're about the same effectiveness. The short warps are faster, and then when you cancel off here, you do another shallow warp to get over there. And then same idea there. This one, it's a 45-degree warp, and then, you know, you grab the ledge, and I warped off it. When I was testing it, I could not get jump from ledge or double jump from ledge, drift in, and then shallow warp to get this warp. If you could figure that out, suddenly you have kind of this route, and then you can also kind of get like an X going, and then, you know, more mix-ups. I mean, this is already kind of nice if you're gonna circle camp someone. So that's just another thing to throw out there. But pretty chill. There's no like required short warps, but cancel here, double jump, short warp into that is gonna make things a little bit faster. But yeah, pretty chill. All right, PS2. I'll just give it a quick watch through. All right, so this is where things get interesting. You got a lot more options. The first section there is just a couple of short warps on that platform, and then doing that connecting shallow warp. We're gonna take a closer look at that real quick. This is what makes shallow warps a little harder, making sure that after you cancel your warp here, you want to drop down for a moment, double jump, and then start your warp pretty early from there, and then you know, shallow warp onto there, and then you're good. One thing I try to do here, it's possible, it's a lot easier on Small Battlefield and Battlefield, is kind of warping back to here. Actually, I hit it when I was doing the task, but the playback just didn't work, unfortunately. The one difference there is that instead of just warping immediately to the ledge, you actually have to wait a moment. I think it's because I drifted out a bit, or because the playback did that. You want to try not to drift out because, you know, then you land there. But the main thing is that you actually want to drop down a little bit and then shallow warp, because there's a lot more distance from here to here compared to Battlefield and Small Battlefield. So that's the only thing to really worry about there. And then we'll immediately hop into Small Battlefield because very similar still. So yeah, nothing terribly different. I just started with like a full warp onto the platform. And then yeah, you can see you can get those warps from like here to the side. Yeah, pretty much the same as PS2, like short warps across the platform like that. The drop down shallow warps across, and then also the warps to the ledge back up. And then you're short warping. The thing is, when you double jump from ledge and warp to the platform, this is for PS2 and Small Battlefield and Battlefield by extension, is after the double jump you short warp onto the platform again. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, PS2 and Small Battlefield are pretty similar. Alright, last but not least, we got Battlefield. This is the hardest route possible, but also gives you the most options. So those are all shortens, except for that first one. That was just a warp to the ledge, and then going from there. Then everything else is a shorten, so ledge, shorten, double jump, shorten, 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 shorten. They're all shortens. I've been able to get this cancel into that cancel a lot tighter. I just had it a little loose, like you see she drops down a little bit. But you can tighten that up. I don't have the specifics on that, but something to mess around with. Tighten it up and get it faster. So the hardest cancel just in general is going to be this one right here. You have to buffer it, it's frame perfect, or you fly off. The biggest thing is you got to buffer the up B, and then, you know, you do your inputs from there. So you're doing a shorten straight down, and that's going to get you to there. One thing I'd recommend, so you avoid SDs outside of not buffering the up B, is holding your left stick kind of in towards the stage. So if you mistime it, you know, you end up just here, which is way better than losing stock. But yeah, this is the hardest one. But the cool thing about Battlefield is everything I just covered in Small Battlefield applies to Battlefield. So lots of mix, lots of options there. That kinda concludes everything I wanted to say on this. Hopefully this was helpful. Appreciate you watching. Hope you guys can push this tech even further. Time some people out, ruin some people's days. Make Palutena cool, but also lame. Y'all have a good one.